Oh, that's good.
Let's see what last year.
I've got it. I'll be there.
All right, let me do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started today. I'm so glad to see you guys. It's always nice to wake up on Saturday morning and realize that I get to come hang out with you guys. So thank you for being here. Couple of things. One thing that Gracie has asked me with a sweet reminder on a Post-it note is please let her know if you are not going to be here for the next 2 classes by putting an X by your name. We don't want to order meals for people who won't be able to be here. Obviously, if something comes up at the last minute, that's what it is. But if you already know for the last 2 classes that you can't make it, if something's come up, then just put an X on that sign-in sheet so we'll know not to order a meal for you. Okay. If you have any kind of assignments that need to be turned in, if you guys will do that on the table right there next to the sign-in sheet, make sure your name is on there. I used to be a teacher, and I think that kids used to always assume that I would know whose papers were whose. I am not a mind reader. That's what I used to tell them. I'll tell you guys the same thing. So make sure that you put your name on there so I can put it in the correct folder. And the third little piece of housekeeping that I have for you guys this morning is, you guys see all the stuff around this room? You guys are like, oh, it's about to be good, right? Because it is going to be so good this afternoon. I just want you to know that Gracie, who you guys have met, many of you guys have met, she was the one that led worship course. She is my assistant, and she is absolutely fabulous about preparing everything for this class and everything for you guys. So if you, like me, would like to thank Gracie, I've put a great big piece of chart paper back there in the back that Jenna and Derek are looking at right there that says, thank you, Gracie. I would love for you just to write a short thank you note, sign your name, whatever. She's on the Wesley retreat this weekend, so not only did she get all of this ready for us, which she does every single time, and make arrangements for food and all of that, but she also prepared all of the stuff for the Wesley retreat as well that she is on. So she worked really hard this week, and I just want to thank her, and I know you guys probably want to thank her as well for all that she's done for this class. So, so you can do that sometime when we take a break or at lunch. All right. I am thrilled today that we have Derek McAleer here. And he has come to hang out with us and talk about leadership today. So this is the beginning of a module that talks about organization, personal leadership, and what that looks like for each of us. And then the next time that we get together, we're going to talk about congregational culture and leading change, okay? So these 2 classes that we have coming up are really important and very, very relevant for all of us in our contexts, because we want to make sure that we are good leaders and that we are leading well so we can lead our people well. And that's what we are going to be talking about. But as we always do, we're going to start with a little game today. So here's what I would like for you guys to do. Everybody needs to grab an index, well, maybe 2 index cards. 2 index cards and a pen, okay? Two index cards and a pen. All right. Now here's what we're going to do. Okay? The name of this game is called In Sync, not the music groups. In Sync. Now here's what you're going to do. You are going to see if you can think the same way somebody else thinks, okay? You're going to see if you can get in sync with somebody else in terms of answering these questions that I am going to ask you guys, okay? And for every point, for every item that you guys are in sync and have the same answer, you're going to get a point for that, okay? So we're gonna see who is the one that is most in sync with other people in this room. All right, that's the goal of the game. So the way that we're gonna do it is there are gonna be 3 rounds, and each round you're gonna have to find a different partner. Okay, so you're gonna have to sync up with multiple different people. Okay, so everybody get your index cards, get your pen, stand up, find a partner. If you need a partner, raise your hand. If you need a partner, raise your hand. Mary, JJ needs a partner. All right. Mary, do you need a partner?
I do.
Oh, right there. Okay, so here's what you guys are gonna do. You're not gonna talk, okay? But these are the questions that you need to write your answers for. You're trying to predict what the other person will say so you can give the same answer, okay? Don't show each other your answers. Okay, here's the first one. Round 1, the category is food, all right? Food. Here is the first thing that you need to write your answer to be in sync. A food you eat at breakfast. A food you eat at breakfast. Number 2, something that is best eaten cold. Something that is best eaten cold. Number 3, something that is best eaten hot. Number 4, a popular vegetable. All right, now what I need for you guys to do is to compare notes and give yourself a point for any that you and your partner had in common. Okay, go. All right, you guys got it? Did you award yourself points? Okay, find another partner for round 2. Sorry. Yeah, good luck. How are you? Raise your hand if you need a partner. Or the same card, doesn't matter. You didn't do that one? Okay. Does everybody have a partner?
I need a partner. Need a partner here.
Oh, right over here. All right, you got it.
Sorry.
Okay, round 2. The category is elementary school. New category. Okay, you ready? That was just the first one. Okay, round 2, elementary school. Number 1, a popular subject. Number 2, something students dread. Number 3, a popular game in PE. Number 4, an award you might receive.
What was number 2?
Something students dread. Number 1, a popular subject. Number 2, something students dread. Number 3, a popular game in PE. Number 4, an award you might receive. All right, compare answers. Pulse down.
Okay.
All right, once you award yourself points, find another partner for the last round. If you need a partner, raise your hand. Okay, round 3. You guys ready? Category is holidays. Number 1, a favorite holiday.
Do we change again?
Yeah.
I mean, change first?
Another one? Next one? Yeah. Or just stick with the same person.
Oh, okay.
Okay. A favorite holiday is number 1. Number 2, a birthday tradition. Number 3, what you give thanks for at Thanksgiving. Number 4, a Halloween costume. All right, compare answers, and then award yourself points, and then you can have a seat, and we'll figure out who is the most in sync.
I must be lying.
All right, so total up your points. All right.
Halloween.
Yeah, go back to your seats, total up your points, and we're gonna figure out who is the most in sync person in the room. If you have at least 3 points or more, raise your hand. 3 points or more. Total. 3 points or more. All right. If you had 5 points or more, raise your hand. 7 points or more, raise your hand.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, so it's between Nicole and Gary?
Well,
Seven.
That's a.
7. Okay, you guys tied as the most in sync people in the room. Good job. So why did we start out with this game? Well, it's important for us as leaders to be the best leaders that we can be. But if there is a disconnect between who we are and how we lead and the people that we are leading, if we're not in sync with them, then we're going to end up leading ourselves and nobody else. So it's really, really important for us as leaders. Yes, we need to be the best leaders that we are called to be, but we need to be aware of how we are leading in order to make sure that we are leading other people well. Because it does not do anyone any good for us to lead so far ahead and be so confident of our own leadership when we've just left a bunch of people behind. So today we're going to spend some time learning about ourselves as leaders, and I want you guys to be able to grow in leadership. One of you guys said last time, I don't remember who it was, but you said, I didn't realize that CLM was going to be so much about my personal growth and development. But here's the thing, if we are not growing and developing, how can we grow and develop other leaders and other disciples? Because remember that leaders produce leaders and disciples produce disciples. So we've got to continue and continue to learn and improve our leadership so we can then help other people do the same. So today, as we go through these activities, this is about personal leadership, but I want you guys to think about it also in terms of how can I use some of the tools that I've been given to help lead other people, to help other people strengthen their leadership, to help develop more leaders, okay? So yes, I want you to learn this for yourself and internalize that, but also be thinking, how can I take what I've experienced and take that back and help develop other leaders, okay? So the first thing that we're going to do is start with an overview of our personal brand of leadership. In your notebooks, you guys have a page that looks like this. And this is actually put out by the have this company that will go in and help you assess and determine all of these things about your personal leadership. But we're just going to get into this just very, very briefly. And I want you guys to continue to use this if you think that it's helpful as a tool to kind of dive into your own leadership capacity and how God has created each of you as a leader. Now, if you'll notice on the tool, the first thing that is right there in the middle is the word what?
Centeredness.
Centeredness, exactly, centeredness. And it says that centeredness is engaging all parts of the mind to become fully present. Now, here's the thing, what the Bain Institute says about leadership is that there is one thing that is crucial in order for people to be leaders that inspire others. And why is inspiration so important? If we are leaders, we need to be able to inspire other people to grow, right? And so as we look at this chart, there is one thing that is crucial for all of us who are leaders that want to and seek to inspire others. And that one thing is right there in the center, which is centeredness. Now, what does that look like for us as Christian leaders? I think that in order for us to be truly centered, for us to engage all parts of our mind, to become fully present in whatever we're doing, we've got to think about that in multiple aspects. We have to think about that physically. What does it mean to be in a physical space where I am centered and fully present? When I'm here and I'm engaged. What does that look like? What do I need to do physically in order to be fully engaged with the people that I find myself leading? And then the second thing is emotionally. We need to mentally and emotionally be fully present with the people that we're called to lead. And sometimes that's recognizing, hey, I'm bringing some stuff to the table today. And just getting it out there. Remember several weeks ago, well, months ago now, we've been together so long, I had the elephant in the room. Remember my elephant? Well, that sometimes we have to address the elephant in the room that's in ourselves and recognize, hey, I'm bringing some emotional stuff to the table today, and getting that out and being fully present. And then the third thing is spiritually. We need to be spiritually centered. We need to make sure that spiritually we are in the right place so we can be the people that God has called us to be. And this afternoon, we're going to spend a lot of time just thinking about our own spiritual development. What does it look like for us to concentrate on that and to create kind of a plan for our own spiritual growth and development to make sure that we are right there in the center of this leadership circle, that we are right there in the center of God's will, okay? Yes, Diane?
What was the first thing? It was emotionally present and spiritually present.
Physically present. Yeah, physically present, just physically there, and settled. So those are the three things that make up a leader that is centered. Now, here's the interesting thing about this chart, is that when they talk about your leadership brand, is kind of how they call it, that each of us has a particular leadership brand that are our strengths and our characteristics and the things that we do well that inspire others to grow and change and move forward in their leadership and in their growth process and in their spiritual development. Here's the interesting thing, though, is that they say that it's not required for all of us to be good at all of these things. Now, I don't know if there are any people in here that are like me, but I tend to be an overachiever. I want to be good at all of the things, right? So what I do with a chart like this is I identify what are the things that I'm not good at, and let me work on them. So let me make them better. And you know what they're talking about? Is that they say, find the things that you're good at and move those to the next level and excel even more in those areas. So what's interesting is that they say if you can identify your top 4 characteristics, the top 4 things that you think you are good at that other people, this is the crucial part about your leadership, grow in those areas because that's your own personal brand of leadership. I'm not going to lead the same way that Edward's going to lead, and he's not going to lead the same way that Lori's going to lead. We all have our own personal brand of leadership. And whatever it is that God has equipped you to do well, do that well. Do that to the best of your ability and grow in your ability to lead in that way. The one thing that we all need to make sure that as leaders we are doing is having this sense and this presence of centeredness right here in those 3 main areas. So how do you go about determining your leadership brand? Here's what the company will do for you, okay? They will come into your organization and they'll do 360-degree reviews of different people and say, hey, how do you feel like Steve inspires you? How do you feel like Steve inspires you? How do you feel like Steve inspires you? Or you know what you guys can do for yourself is you can reproduce this and you can give it to people who know you. You can give it to people who you lead and who you work with and say, hey, I'm trying to figure out what is my personal brand of leadership. Will you just mark the 4 things that you see in my life that really inspire you to become more like Christ, inspire you to become a better leader, and let them mark it up. And then you take all of this and get an aggregate score, and you might, the interesting thing is that you might discover a strength that you didn't even know that you had. You might do something so well naturally that you just make the assumption that's no big deal, and people are like, that's the exact thing that inspires me about the way that you lead. And so I encourage you guys to get a group of people who will give you some great honest feedback and figure out what is your personal leadership brand. How did God create you to lead uniquely and specially in this organization called the church, as well as just in your personal life as well? Okay, so today we're going to spend a lot of time around this idea of being a centered leader, all of those things that are crucial and essential for that. And then I encourage you guys to figure out how that plays out in your life uniquely in these other ways. Any questions about that tool before we move on? All right. Well, Derek McAleer is here today, like I said before, and when Jay and I were talking about personal leadership, who should we get to co-teach this class, Jay didn't even have to think before he said, you need to get Derek McAleer to teach this class with you. So I'm excited for Derek to be here, and I know that some of you guys have questions for Derek later on because he works at the conference office and knows a lot of things. So we're going to get to all of those questions either at lunch, you can corner him very nicely while he eats his lunch, or after lunch. I have all of those questions that you guys gave me earlier that he will then answer after lunch as well. All right? So, Derek, you want to get started, and will you start with a prayer too?
Sure. So before we pray, let me just ask to make sure I'm where you are. How many of y'all are in this class because someone else told you you needed to be in it? Welcome to life. I went to seminary because that's what I had to do to be able to get the other. I was halfway there before I decided I liked it. You know, how many of y'all have a sense that you know exactly what you're going to do to serve God after this class? Okay. Let's pray together. Lord our God, here we are today, giving up a Saturday, actually giving back your Saturday to you. Because we want to follow this call on our hearts. Some of us are pretty clear about what it is, some of us not so much yet. What we know is you have a call on us and a claim on us, and we know our greatest joy is going to be in obedience to that claim. Help us today, O Lord, to have ears that hear what your Spirit whispers to us in the midst of all the other conversation. Help our hearts be open to hear those truths that you are speaking into our inner being, so that we can not just be equipped, not just enabled, but encouraged to be the type of leader that you're going to use in our situations. Our world is in great need of the gospel, Lord. Equip us to bring that gospel in a way people can hear and in a way that they can respond to it. You're a good and a great God. We want to be your faithful children. Amen. So, how many of us are all the same? How many of us are all different? Well, it just depends on your view. If you're a geneticist, we're all the same. Everybody got the same DNA, the same RNA, all that stuff. We're all about the same. We tend to focus on our differences, and differences are important, but there's a lot of commonalities too. Leadership is one of those things that within North American culture, now I have no clue about other cultures. I've not lived in them. I've not partaken in them. I've not studied them. So I don't want to pretend that I can tell you what leadership in Fiji Island is. I have no clue. But in North American culture, leadership is going to be very similar. You're going to tweak it a little bit, but it's going to be pretty similar. So what do you think leadership is? This is where you talk. You may not have been aware. Taking initiative. Guiding. Following the Holy Spirit. Or
Mentorship.
Humility.
sorry, I heard one over here. And then I heard one over here.
Humility.
Did I miss one?
Living.
Equipping and
Service.
There are no hymns that say, I want to grow to be a Barnabas. But he's one of the great characters of the book of Acts who slips in and slips out. You know? We'll probably talk about at least one of those, each of those, at least for a minute today. Every single one of those is active. We've got this fully set up, but y'all can't read it no matter what I write down. And you're just going to think hard. Or you can move it back down. There you go. I want to see you anyhow. So, but there are some broad ways to think about leadership. If you look at most of these, they're tasks. They're things you do. But if you want to think about what the essence of leadership is, I mean, you use a different color to get it right. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. One of the things about using this term is that points out that Hitler was a tremendous leader. Leadership is not always good, not always positive. I bet everybody in this room can think of people who are leaders in this country that they think are leading people the wrong way. And I bet that we don't want to get into a conversation about who we Leadership is influencing people. And the more you exercise your influence, the more a leader you are. A leader without followers is just taking a walk, John Maxwell says. Now, who can you influence? Well, I can influence my family. Anybody ever heard a man ought to be the leader in his household? Well, every man is a leader in his household. No man that I know is the leader in his household unless he's single. Because the truth of the matter is, parents, do your children exercise influence over you? Oh, yeah. Leadership is not about being in the top position. It's about exercising influence. The more you can influence, the more you lead it. If you work in a company and you're not the boss, you are exercising leadership without being the top person. Just trying to influence. And the great thing about thinking of leadership as influence is when I think about it as influence, it's not a task, it's a way to live. Now, if I was going to shift the conversation, which we would never do, but just if we were gone, and we wanted to make a big jump, and I can't write worth the flip, y'all just, from influence to discipleship. Have y'all read the Great Commission? Anybody remember it? Matthew 28:16-20. All authority on heaven and earth is given to me, and my memory is, the older Revised Standard Version, because that's what they had when I was in vacation Bible school as a kid. So all my memory verses are the old RSV. All authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. Go therefore into all nations, baptizing them. Go therefore make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe whatsoever I have commanded you. And lo, I'm with you always to the end of the age. What's the key influence words there? Here's, I've set you up. I've set you up. It's just the way this Socratic technique works. Teaching them to obey. If we teach people all Jesus, the devil knows all the things Jesus has commanded. In fact, he quoted them back to Jesus, if you remember in the temptations. Teaching them is not influence. That's education. Influence is teaching people to obey. Discipleship has to do with teaching people to obey. They didn't use this term when I was in seminary, but it's become a big term since then, a whole school of spiritual formation. What does it look like when you live a life in obedience to Christ? Eugene Patterson wrote his biography, A Long Obedience in the Same Direction. Isn't that interesting? And I loved it because the same direction means there's some in the same direction. If I put this in business language, nobody in your business is going to talk about spiritual formation or the formation of your character. They're going to talk about leadership development. What's the difference between the two? Wording. Well, the wording and the goal. The goal.
That would be like teaching them to do.
Yeah. One of the reasons that we have corporations with such difficulties now is we have learned all the techniques of leadership without learning the ethics of leadership. Spiritual formation has to do with who you are. Our leadership development, discipleship development, discipleship making, influence has to do with shaping the character of the people with whom we interact. teaching them to obey all that I have commanded you, which is using our influence over them. When I served Davisburg Methodist Church, when I was in seminary, there were 82 members, 35 people on Sunday morning. I could literally visit every member every week. The whole town only had 432 people. I mean, it was huge, you know. And I learned ministry, influencing one-on-one. When I went to the Dudley Charge, had 4 little churches. I couldn't visit every member every week, but I could visit every member every month, everybody who was local. When I got to Rankin, suddenly you're into a couple of hundred people, and you're into I can't see everybody all the time, so you do triage, and you see the people with the biggest needs that you know about, which are not always the people with the biggest needs. And when I got to Rankin is when I realized I need to learn more about what I'm doing, because what I learned to do in those early churches won't work when you get to this size. That's when I went back to school and got my doctorate. The real reason wasn't to get the degree. The real reason was to learn things that I hadn't learned that I needed to know. When I got to St. Mary's, when I got to Forest Hill, suddenly I rarely work with individuals. I work with groups, which means I work with the people who work with the people who work with the one-on-ones. Leveraging my influence. Any of y'all like football? I'm a big college football fan. I'm hoping they bring football back to Florida State this year. They haven't done it yet. We're going to ignore the heretics in the room. How many head coaches coach the whole team by themselves?
Zero.
None. Every head coach works with the assistant coaches who work with the players. Leveraging influence. And a great part of the work of the head coach is what the head coach does with the assistant coach. And the head coach knows the players and works with the players, but they're leveraging their influence here. Have y'all heard the notion words create worlds? The way we talk about things shapes the way we think about things. That's why it's so important. When I went to seminary, they taught us about inclusive language. And I was a Southern white boy. What the heck is this liberal crap about? You know? Except I was going to school with a lot of women who in 1980, it was still fairly new for women to be going to seminary and to be answering God's call to preach. And they didn't particularly want to be excluded because I use English nouns that were not in the original scriptures, but they were in my English translation, and I just shut them out.
Can you say that first thing you said about words create worlds, that what we say?
The way we talk about things shapes how we think about things. If I always talk about leaders in masculine pronouns, when I go looking for leaders, I won't be looking for any women. If I talk about missions as if it's all about our church and what our church is doing, I won't ever think about the larger mission. If I talk about the Bible in terms of I and me, I'll think that Christianity is a lone ranger enterprise, and it's just me and Jesus. And if you listen, there are denominations that pretty much want to tell you about the priesthood of all believers, and the next thing they'll do is it'll be every individual is responsible for him or herself, and that's it. Except the gospel talks about communities. The way in which we talk will shape how we think. The way in which we talk about following Jesus and the way in which we talk about leading will shape how we think about leading. So, if we talk about discipleship as learning about Jesus, then disciples are what? Learners. Which for years was a predominant way we talked about Christian education. Disciples are learners. If we talk about disciples as people who exercise influence for Christ, the way I think is different. That's a different way of thinking about what I'm called to do. I'm still called to learn about Christ, but I'm learning about Christ for a different reason. I'm not learning about Christ so that I can follow Christ by myself. I'm learning about Christ so that we can follow Christ together, so that I can bring people with me. What was Jesus' command to the disciples? Great Commission. Go into the world and do what? Make disciples. Why didn't he say go into the world and be disciples?
Pass it on.
Because the only way to be a disciple is to make more disciples.
Reach one.
Disciples become disciplers. That's an essential part of being a disciple, is to make more disciples. If you're a leader, you're called to exercise your leadership to bring more along. 1 Corinthians, Paul says, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Now, most of us would say, do as I say, not as I do. But the call of the gospel is to live your life in such a way that you can say, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And we're going to talk about what that means in the real life in a little bit. If the greatest leaders are people who follow a great leader, which is how we understand the call of Christ to be, right? Great leaders follow a great leader. If you're in the military, the great captains follow great majors. Great majors follow great generals. Great generals follow great brigadiers. I mean, you know, all up to the chief of staff. There's a chain of command, and everybody wants somebody great above them that they can follow. If we're following a great leader, part of our job is to help the people whom we're bringing with us, who are not following us because we're teaching them to obey Christ, not to obey us. We're bringing them with us, but we want them to bring people. Discipleship is the ultimate pyramid scheme. The only difference is, in the end, everybody gets the prize. Everybody gets the glory of heaven. So you're trying to bring people with you. So let's think about what it really means to be a leader. I can remember. Well, how many of y'all have jobs in the corporate world? Yeah. Anybody ever talk to you about your leadership means equipping your team? Oh yeah, they started that, what, about 20 years ago, I think? Yeah. Robert Greenleaf's book on servant leadership was not a Christian-oriented book. It was a public leadership book for the corporate world. Before that thought started coming in, and still sort of in our thinking, the leader is the guy, occasionally the gal, but still the guy, who sits at the end of the table, and he's got all his counselors with him, and they're all offering advice. And at the end of the day, what does the guy at the end of the table do? He decides. And you know why he decides? Because he is the genius. And if they give him enough information, he can decide, by golly. And then we all go follow his decision into the breach. Hooray, hooray, hooray. Y'all try that at church board meeting very much? You're thinking that maybe it might not work? What if the purpose of being the leader was to make everybody around the table into a genius? So that rather than I'm trying to be the genius, I'm trying to be the genius maker. I want to help my whole team to become geniuses so that we can decide what we're going to do. The way you talk about being the leader of the church has to shift from being the decider to being the one who convenes the group and equips the group to decide. How do we want to do? What do we want to do? And when I think of leadership as this way, how many of y'all take family vacations? Your kids get a say?
Yeah.
Whose kids get a say? How old are your kids? When they got a say, when they first started getting a say?
Oh, fine.
5, 6?
Yeah.
Who says I'm never letting my kids decide? Somebody who let the kids decide one time to Disney World in August. If my table is like this, which is what most conference tables are like, and there are seats all around, and you want to become the genius maker, where do you sit?
Inside.
If you're the chair of the committee and you want to be a genius maker, where do you sit? Do not take the head chair. In fact, we'll talk later, you may not even want to sit around a table like this if you want to help people think that we're all making a decision together. Who can influence the decision? Everybody. If my goal is to make them all geniuses so that we can decide together, then this person here, who is a raging extrovert and who often engages the mouth long before they engage the brain, and this person here who sat in the corner seat and probably won't say 5 words all day, not because they're dumb, not because they're shy, but because they're introverted, which is not the same thing as being shy. An extrovert has to talk to learn what they think. An introvert has to think about it to know what they want to say. It's whether you process things out here or you process things in here. Those of us who are extroverts, we have to talk about it to learn what we think. We'll talk ourselves into our decision because we don't know what we think until we talk about it. Introverts have to think about it for a while. Too much talk stops them. It inhibits their thinking. But the introvert may be the smartest cookie in the room. They're just not the loudest cookie. If you are the group leader, your job is to lead in such a way this person and this person. And this person that we don't know what they are yet. But everybody gets in on the decision. If you're an introvert, any introverts in here? How many of you introverts have friends? Most introverts have fewer friends and very deep lasting friendships, but not near as many. Extroverts have tons of acquaintances. They may or may not have friends, but they have a lot of acquaintances. Who has the greater influence? I don't know, the deeper my bond with you, the greater my influence with you. Even extremely shy people have people whom they influence. So if I'm an introvert and I'm 60 years old, how many people have I had the chance to influence in my life? Everybody can be a leader. Everybody can influence tremendous groups of people. We read the monks, all the desert fathers. Those guys were not extroverts. If you go out and live in the desert, you're not an extrovert. But we're still reading their stuff today, aren't we? So if you got your note pages, some of the basic leadership principles that we want to think about. Rick Warren says, everybody is called to lead somebody. Everybody's called to lead somebody. And he uses Paul and Timothy's example. Y'all know the story of Paul and Timothy? Timothy is a young man. Paul baptized him. Timothy grows up with his mother and his grandmother, Lois and It's Eunice. Paul first talks about Timothy as he's his spiritual father. I'm your daddy before people use that kind of language, you know. 1 Timothy, my true son in the faith. But later on, he's bringing Timothy along with him, and they're going out together. And then he writes to Timothy, you know what I teach. You know how I live. You know what my purpose in life is. You know my faith, my patience, my love, my endurance. Why does Timothy know those things? Because he's been with him on the trip. He's been with him. He determines pace setting. Run this race with me. Keep with me. Later on his own, Paul's encouraging him. They're partners. Timothy, my fellow worker, sends you his greetings. I hope to send Timothy to you, but I've got to send him somewhere else that needs him more right now. So if you were thinking about your own life, who would be your spiritual parent? Your Paul. Are you in parenthood or pace setting or partnering stage with him? Who's your Timothy? Who are you bringing along? Look at my discipleship. Timothy's don't happen by accident. They happen when you see someone and intentionally pour yourself into them. One of the best music directors I ever had was a lady named Martha Jo Fountain in Ebenezer in Macon. We were a modest church. We ran 100 people on Sunday morning. We're not a big congregation or anything like that. Martha Jo could make you think you could do it. She would not only make you think you could sing the solo, she would make you sing the solo and it would be good. She didn't ask people who could not sing solos to sing. I mean, she picked people who could do it, but then she coached them up until they did it and did it well. She should have been in a huge church. She didn't want to be in a huge church. She didn't care about that. She wanted to work with individuals and bring them alongside. I had a children's director who could coach up folks. And she was not a paid children's director. She was a volunteer, Becky Cusimano. Becky Cusimano was the kind of children's director that when you worked for her once, you would go work with her again. There are people I've worked with. We're done now? She had a whole group, the Beckettes, we call them, Becky and her Beckettes. And everybody laughed about being a Beckette, but it's a great team. But she picked people out. She pulled Diane alongside of her and poured herself into Diane. And then when the Navy in its infinite wisdom moved Becky, here comes Diane, who brought Melody with her and poured herself into Melody, even though Melody was older than she was. Y'all heard this? Leadership is service. We said that earlier, didn't we?
Yes.
Leadership is service, sure enough. Some people get into leadership with that notion, but I don't think there are as many. We laugh, we like to tell jokes about our politicians. How many of those politicians started out with this notion? I think very few. I think most people get into politics, get into it because of the seats that they really want to serve their community. But we talk about people going purple. They begin to take the robes of authority and assume the royal nature. How do you keep leadership as being service? One ways is, when you sit up in the room, where do you sit? If you're always in the king's chair and you're making the pronouncements of wisdom after your counselors have offered their guidance, and then you, the genius, distills the wisdom of the group and pronounces the decision. And y'all laugh about that. You're going to sit in the meeting and you're going to think, the king has sat on their throne. You're going to watch it happen. Because that's the way the world works. Jesus said, in this world, you see how the Lord wants to take authority and all, but it shall not be so among you. You remember that? Mm-hmm. He knows what we're like. If leadership is influence, influence can be influencing people to serve me. Creflo Dollar needs that multi-million-dollar jet to be able to do what God calls him to do. Send me your money. But if leadership is influence, and my goal is to be a servant leader, then my influence is to help serve people. How am I influencing myself and influencing others so that we're serving others? Which, by the way, is one of the great risks in nature of thinking that everything is individualistic. And I don't mean American, I mean North America. It's not just the United States phenomenon, it's a Western culture phenomenon. Everything is about the individual rather than about the community. In the Christian world, we're called to live and be in communities and have an influence in communities and to serve the community. Now, when y'all worked in the public sector, anybody ever worked for a job where what they wanted was results? Y'all meet the standard? And if you did, what happened when you brought in the results they wanted? Got a raise, got promoted, got a pat on the back, got applauded. Are results bad? Absolutely not. I remember a parable where Jesus cursed a fig tree. I look for fruit. There ain't no fruit. You gone. That's the Derek translation. But what I want to say is the gospel does not avoid the notion that results matter. This is not a journey where the point is to have a good cruise together. The point is that the boat goes somewhere. And I hope we have a good cruise together too. But we're not just circling out in the ocean. That's not what the Christian life is about. When I grew up in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, it was all about relationships. All about relationships. Which, by the way, if you were 20 years old and went to Woodstock in 1968, how old are you now? 7. That's right. The whole notion that the old people like this music and the young people like this music, the old people grew up with Jefferson Airplane, okay? Leadership is about finding the balance between getting results and having the strong relationships. If I have a lot of great relationships with people, we're not teaching them to obey and showing them to obey and practicing obedience together. Well, we can all sing Kumbaya around the fire. But Jesus ain't coming for that. If it's all about results, push for results, Well, there's a name for that person. It'll be nice, we'll just call him a jerk.
I thought you run jail there.
Jerk H. So think about where you are on this spectrum in the roles that you're working in leadership right now, in the places where you're exercising influence right now. Is your focus more on the side? And the reason I say spectrum, it's rarely either or. But sometimes I'm over here, and sometimes I'm over here, and sometimes I'm here, and usually I'm in motion. Usually I'm sort of trying to find that right place. So have a little conversation around the table for a minute about where you see yourselves in your leadership role and where you find the stresses that push you towards the other side. As the church lady said, talk amongst yourselves.
What is it?
I'm very familiar with that. I realize this is not I'm still wrong.
Result of the relationship.
Yeah, definitely.
But I know the value is my reality, but reality is that it's over there. You got more to give it all. Each other.
I have to say where I am. I have two people that we started out church the last 5 years.
Hard work.
They were never church before, and so they feel. So I instruct them. Usually about because they don't have the language.
Part of your conversation should be about which side is your natural side.
I'm more relationship. It's not very best.
James.
My child, if you're not, what do you, how do you rank?
Okay. So as you're thinking about this, part of the tension that you find is sometimes I want to make Sally or Billy Joe feel good about themselves, and so when they have a little problem, I don't keep pushing for results because it unsettles them. Did most of y'all have a little unsettling that drove you into this? Yeah. How many times does the Holy Spirit in the Bible go to somebody and simply encourage them and just help them calm down and tell them you're okay? Most of the time when the Holy Spirit pours upon the organization, upon the people, what happens? Stir stuff up. And then when you put a stick in and you stir it up, what happens? It gets smelly for a while. But it doesn't stay that way. When you start pushing for results with people who before you have only worked on relationships with, it will get smelly for a while.
Yes,
Stay in a relationship. You may have to push a little less, but keep pushing. The old saw is, I do it and you watch. We do it together. You do it and I watch. You do it. That's how you bring somebody along and you get them. You know, they've never taught Sunday school. Lori Lentz ended up being a leader in small groups. She started out taking my classes. Then one time I said, let me walk you through what I'm doing to teach these classes. And then we taught a class together. She's still leading classes at St. Mary's now. And she was, in fact, she wouldn't call herself the class leader. She only would call herself the convener. Her brain could not see herself in the role she was really in. Wonderful lady. God was wonderful. Just had to be pushed. Couple of just old saws that leaders really know. You remember Eleanor Roosevelt's quote? Great people talk about ideas, medium people talk about events, small people talk about people. Something like that. You can just take this to the bank. All great leaders are learners. Wesley required his preachers to read his sermons and his doctrines. And once they have to develop a taste for reading or develop a taste for doing something else. All great leaders are learners. Now, if you're not a physical reader person, then learn what audiobooks are about. You know, there's a style in which you can get the information which will work for you. What's the last book you read? It wasn't fiction.
Happy Grove.
You should have was that an assignment?
Honesty right there.
Who's reading a book that they're not being assigned right now? Yeah. What's the last new thing you learned how to do?
Announcements, I'm sure.
You could tell, I came into ministry in 1980. I could watch my colleagues then and see where they are now. And we could tell early on who the people were who were going to go places. And the reason was they were always learning something new and developing new skills. And you could just tell. It wasn't that they were so good themselves, it's that they were always straight. They didn't quit their learning when they got out of seminary. And one of the things they did was they routinely brought in outsiders to help them. Insecure people don't bring in outsiders. Because I know it all. And I will not be shown up. Now, they never think that way. I mean, they never acknowledge that. Secure people love to bring in outsiders because I learned something. I remember when I was in the Dudley Circuit, 4 little churches on a charge. We had about 80 in worship between all 4 churches. So, I mean, we're not talking about big churches. But I wanted to do something about Sunday school, so I brought in Cindy. She was Cindy Hooks at the time. But she had the largest Sunday school in the annual conference. So I got to come in and talk to us about Sunday school. I didn't know a lot about Sunday school. I knew I wanted to get better. And I knew I didn't know what to do, but I didn't spend my time, waste my time floundering around. I brought in somebody who knew what to do. And we learned from her. When you bring in outsiders, when you bring in consultants, when you find out who's really doing it, and you're willing to bring them in to help you, if you're the children's minister, who's got the best children's program you know? One of the things that has impressed me about Jim and Jennifer Coward, y'all know the Cowards? They're at Harvest Methodist, which is routinely among the top 25 fastest growing Methodist churches in the country here in Warner Robins, Georgia, started from scratch. It has the largest attendance of any Methodist church in our conference, and the 2 of them still both have coaches. They change their coaches from time to time because they want to get somebody ahead of where they are now. They're at the biggest church in our conference, and they have coaches to help them get better. Leaders are learners. You can sit around with people whose ministry has had an impact, and if you go to lunch with them, they'll be talking about what they're trying new. They'll be talking about what book they're learning. You know, you can go sit at another table, and the pastors will be talking about how unfair everybody is to them, and what a problem how mean their churches are, and how the DS doesn't care. Pick your group. Set your sails the way you want to go. My wife was a media specialist, and I remember distinctly her coming home one day and said, I have to find another table to eat lunch at in the schoolroom because the group of teachers I've been eating with, all they ever do is complain about work. I got to find another group to sit and have lunch with because I can't listen to that every day. I'll become a whiner and a complainer. And if you're like me, your natural distribution is to find fault in everybody else, then you really need some help not to do that. Have y'all heard, I can't imagine you haven't heard, action is what? I ain't got to write it. Action speak louder than words. What you're doing, shout so loud I can't hear what you're saying. Proverbs talks about the power of the tongue. Y'all remember that? 1 Timothy talks about the power of the tongue, bridling the tongue. What we say matters. What we do matters more. What we do while we say. Does anybody watch Body Language? The FBI will tell you, they'll teach you how to look at the person you're talking to and figure out if they're lying or not by their body language. And you had somebody talk to you and you knew this person is lying to me? How'd you know it? All the non-verbal clues. Have you ever listened to a preacher and said to yourself, a poorly delivered sermon by somebody who is convicted of its truth has more impact than an eloquent message by somebody who does not care? The research, we've got it on your sheet. Albert, is it Moravian? This guy with the long name. 7% of our understanding comes from words. This is why conference call meetings are so dreaded. 7%, we can all hear each other, but 38% of our understanding comes from the tone of voice, and 55% comes from why if you're going to have a hard conversation, it always should be in person. Always. You do not deliver tough news by email, for heaven's sake. The problem with email is people read it in the tone of voice they feel, not in the tone of voice you wrote. This is why if you're preaching, you need to think about what your motives are. I helped with the License to Preach School. And this last year, fella preached a pretty good sermon. And he literally stood like this, knees sort of. And he had an excellent sermon. And then today we all went, that was really a blasé experience. And he went, what? I said, what's this thing with the hands in the pockets just sitting there? It's like you leaning on a post or something. Well, as it turns out, the preaching coach who had talked earlier in the week had said, don't be gesticulating, put your hands in your pockets. And so he did what he was told. I said, the man who told you that was a nut. Which is really great when you take a class and then one professor says, don't do what the other one said to do. But when you're just sitting like this, here's how you can tell somebody's getting ready to talk to you. When they sit back at the table and they sit like this, they're sort of disengaged. When they pull the chair up and sit up, it's getting ready to come, folks. Before they ever say anything, you know. Now, it might be good stuff, but the body tells you you're engaged. Car salesman. Anybody here ever sell cars for a living? Yeah. If they ask can they go to the bathroom, they've made a decision. They have. They may not have announced it yet. Their brain may not be connected up, but the body's already relaxing. Do not ask to go to the bathroom at the car dealership. Go before you go in. Helpful hints that you learned here. If we use the word vulnerable, what do you think of? How many of you thought of kryptonite? Immediately, yeah.
Chris. Chris.
Weak. Honest.
Transparent.
It's interesting. The first thoughts, or the first announced thoughts, were negative. And then, as is our tendency in groups, we had to find something good to say. Because Mama did tell us, if you can't say something nice. We tend to think of vulnerability as weakness. That's sad. Have y'all read the description in Isaiah of Jesus? He was bruised, he was beaten, by his stripes are we healed. Where is the weakness? Where is the weakness in that? I grew up in the late 60s, early 70s. I remember the sit-ins and the protests and all of that. I was a kid, but I remember watching them. But I remember watching black people get the fool beat out of us and not punching back. And first off, I was a kid, and when you're on the playground, somebody swings at you, what do? You swing back. And I remember thinking, how can they not fight back? I was a kid, I didn't understand how strong you had to be so vulnerable. Have y'all been to ICU waiting room yet? Uh-huh. Y'all watch Steel Magnolias? Great scene. Yeah, they're all so tough, but you see who's in this waiting. You see who's in this ICU room, and you see who's out there. They think we're just magnolias, but we're steel. Vulnerability. I am a flawed human being. A lot of people will not exhibit they are flawed. They want to put on a show. And sometimes they are not doing it because they want to deceive anybody. It's not a wickedness. They believe that a leader, I have to be strong for the children. You heard that? I got to be strong for this and that and the other. Which means we will teach people that vulnerability is weakness and we must be strong. Every leader will demonstrate their vulnerability. Some will do it willingly and some will do it unwillingly. But sooner or later, y'all watch every time you turn around, some great we find out feet are made of clay. It's just sad. That which is done in secret will be shouted from the rooftop, said Jesus. Every Christian leader is vulnerable. Every leader at all. Great leaders will be vulnerable publicly and find ways to be accountable for their vulnerability. When you bring people around you who know who you really are and who can speak into your life, don't do that. You're crazy. This will not be good. I had a meeting one time with the bishop where I was unhappy. And I had a meeting with the bishop to explain my unhappiness to them. This is not the recommended technique for young preachers. One of my friends, we were talking on the phone, and I mentioned that I had a meeting. I was going to such and such a place to get some lunch, and then I was going to meet with the bishop. And he knew me. He's known me for a long, long time. He shows up where I'm having lunch. And he sat down across from me and said, Derek, I came to tell you, don't let the redhead get out today. Now that's a friend. I was open with him about what I was doing and how I felt and how unhappy I was. And by golly, I was going to speak my mind. And he came to me and said, you're a fool if you speak your mind. Do not do this. That is a good friend. But if I hadn't been willing to say, here's where I am, if I'd been tough enough, and he wouldn't have had the chance to come alongside me and keep me from doing something stupid. If you hide who you are, it's going to come out. It's just going to come out bad. If you are who you are with people, they will hold you accountable. They will keep you from being a fool. And actually, your influence over them will be greater. You know why? What does Hebrews say about Jesus? He was tempted how? In every way that we are. Jesus knows all about our troubles. That's what I learned singing. He will guide you the day you know. He knows what it's like to be tempted. And yet, he was vulnerable with his friends. He took them aside and said, pray for me. My soul is heavy even unto death. Pray for me. Jesus didn't hide. Why'd you do? Because if I have to be the genius, I can't let people know that the genius doesn't know it. But if I don't have to be the genius, then I don't have to know everything. Accountability helps you be better. And where'd you get these statistics from? These are really cool.
I don't know. I've used those a lot. I don't know where they came from.
You are 42% more likely to achieve your goals if you write them down. Just the magical power of publicly acknowledging that this is a goal. But you are 95% more likely if you have an accountability partner. Anybody ever been to Weight Watchers? The whole goal of Weight Watchers is to say, we'll be accountable with you. And in that accountability is the greatest vulnerability for anybody. You got to stand on that scale, and it's going to have a weight on it. And that lady's going to sit there with that little chart. Have you ever been to AA? Hi, my name is, and what? I am vulnerable. And AA leaders know that half of the people in the room are still drinking at any given time. But they're here, they're acknowledging their vulnerability, and we're going to try and hold each other accountable. I had a friend of mine, David Johnson, who worked at Charter when it was, among other things, an addiction recovery place. And he said, I can tell you when we let somebody out whether we've succeeded or not. There's only one question you have to ask them. You'll know whether you succeeded. I thought, well, this is genius. What's the question? He said, all we have to do is ask them is, what are you going to do tonight? And he said, if they say, I'm going to a meeting, we know we did it. And if they say anything else, it doesn't matter what else it is. Isn't that interesting? If they acknowledge that I'm going to go to a place that'll hold me accountable, we know they're strong. But if they say, I'm so strong, I don't need to be held accountable, we know they're going to break and come back. You ever heard, it's lonely at the top? If it's lonely at the top, you did it wrong. If it's lonely at the top, you did it wrong. Last generic truth. If leadership is influence, then leaders lead from the bottom, they lead to the sides. If leadership is influence, you can exercise influence up or down or any which way. We use Jay Hansen. Y'all know Jay Hansen? Yeah. How many of y'all believe that Jay likes to do reports and collect data and gather that kind of grunt information? If you want to drive Jay Hansen crazy, you put him in that kind of place. So you know what he's done? He's gathered people around him with the set of skills he does not have, so that he can use the information that he doesn't have the gifts and graces to gather. He is letting people lead from below and from the side, even though he's the quote leader, but he's gathered people around. He did a partners meeting one time, and his dad was there, and his dad came up to him afterwards and said, Jay, I am so proud of you. And Jay said, well, all I did was say the things Ann told me to say. His dad said, but you said it well. But he also let Ann tell him what to say. Willing to be led from all sides, willing to lead from all sides. My job is to help our bishop make good decisions. My job is not to be the bishop. Thank you, Jesus. But my job is to lead up. As well as I have staff whom I lead, some of whom I've taught how to call the bishop directly. Not to go through me, but to call the bishop directly and give him their best information. Because I'm not worried that somehow if they talk to him directly, I'll be cut out. What the heck is that about? Part of my job is to work with the cabinet. I am not the boss of the cabinet. And the day I try to tell them what to do, they'll make sure I understand. I am not the boss of the cabinet. My job is to influence them. I think from the side, they think from below. Whatever. My job is to exercise influence. I'm not the boss of a pastor in this annual conference. Not a single one. But my job is to help equip our pastors, though actually I work more with church leaders than I do with pastors to do well. If the leadership is influenced, then you exercise your influence every which way. So think for just a second. I don't even think you have a place to write this on your chart, but think for just a second. I'm going to get you to write 3 names down. Who's somebody that is, quote, above you that you have the opportunity to influence? Write that name down. This is where everybody grabs a pen. Every head bowed, every eye open, looking at your paper. The name of somebody above you have opportunity to influence. I didn't mean that you're influencing, but you have the opportunity. You know what the other 2 are going to be. The name of somebody below you in the organization chart. Does not mean beneath you. It means their role is different. But you have opportunity to influence. And somebody lateral. Now, it may not be in the same organization. One of these answers may be about where you work, and another answer may be about your church, and another answer may be about your family. Where you have the opportunity to influence grandma, who is the matriarch. And how will your influence help them become a genius? Great coaches. How do you know somebody is a great coach? The team won.
Roll Tide.
We are a Christian organization.
You can't help yourself.
Great leaders help other people succeed. That's how you know they're a great leader. Why was Jack Welch so? Because GE did well. Not because Jack Welch did well, but GE did well. We will decide in 50 years whether President Trump is a great leader or not. You cannot decide now. We will decide in 50 years because we will see, did America do well? If you've got any history, when Martin Luther King was alive, how many people thought he was not a great leader? A whole bunch of folks. But you look back now, yeah. Great leaders help others succeed. We'll know you're a great leader when the church that you're a member of is doing better. We'll know you're a great leader when the Sunday school class that you're a member of teaches. We'll know you're a great leader when the children's ministry that you're working with is helping little children come to know Jesus. When you're a great leader, it's when other people are doing well. That's how we know. When you're just a leader, we'll know it's because you're getting promoted. You can be a leader, or you can be a great leader. That's your pick. But the path to a great leader is always to service, to influencing others to obey. Think you're up?
All right.
Thank you.
A lot of great information for sure. So let's take a little 15-minute break, get some coffee, get some snacks, use the restroom, decide to buy a car, whatever that is. And then we'll be back here and we'll continue on.
Y'all ask Ann about her next book that's coming out. If y'all don't know it, she's published.
#1 fan right there. So, yes, Andy is correct. I have a book that's coming out. It should be out by the beginning of March. And I've actually ordered some. So if you guys are interested in getting it, it's all about creativity in ministry and leadership, called Get Out of That Box. So hopefully I will have that box from the publisher soon, and then I can bring it to you guys if you're interested in it. So,
Yes.
I'll share that with you guys. Thank you, Andy, for reminding me.
Would you like to? You take one bite.
Have you read that?
I am not. I've read a lot of I was working through a book, the original book called The Vast
No,
American Ministry.
I don't know how to do it.
He's
doing good.
How you
You go with DA.
And you read a little bit and put it down. Read a little bit, you read a little bit and put it down. He writes very dense, but it's sharp. Part of what, you know. They don't care about it. The effort, they want to be in there. So how do you measure it? I've heard all my life, Jesus doesn't call us to be successful, only faithful, which is how neither one of those is. People say that because they're national president. You can't tell if people are growing spiritually.
I am seeing lately,
Which is
I kind of try to keep up with your mama. Oh, she's not actually behind Mother. Mother, mine, it's to be actually.
Okay.
It's my home base.
Good, good.
Right before. She's ready to talk to you about it.
Very good. I can't tell you, very Are you still there?
This is also another thing. Maybe not. Yeah, she got a lot of money, so.
They brought a revival.
3 months. 2 weeks. I don't know. Little guys, I think Brown was.
Yeah,
But like you were just saying, it's really bad. Somebody reminded me. No matter what. That's what I'm running. Yeah.
right.
And I know what I miss my class so much. I tell you how to bring that back up. These people are best. These couldn't be more, talk way more about this than it is about. You're right.
Yeah.
That's where,
I'm gonna try it out, man. I'll say.
I thought you
I almost had.
The other road you do. How's everything in
And then everybody and all of them, like, were there. All but two. That's two, right? Get all the- Yes. Yeah, and two of them were coming, that couldn't come. They went to the- So I really liked that. And then the third training room, so it's very small. It's gonna be my room. And so we're doing the show, and I just thought that things like that. I thought just something small. I think some of them all that most of them they they also I have at least two. So like if churches out like they don't go anymore.
That's right. I didn't thought about that.
Whatever.
You're on the group.
There would be about 22%.
Something. That's what I thought in the article, and that's
She comes.
it's one of my
I saw you. You can't wait for results until you go find out who people are, who the gifts are. And then you can tell, it's the first year, it's like, and by the time you got everything figured out,
So, and you can, yes, you try to train up people.
We were based on,
I tell them, it's not me. Oh, I guess it's the actual shot. My game here, I'm different. You gotta give him a great, he's amazing.
So she asked me. Like, can't be with any of their pirates. I like this. You're really good at it. I love you. Out of the two that I'm training. And I'm like, I'm not like, the last book.
You ready, Miss Ann?
I'm ready.
You make the
I did make them.
They're good.
better for the morale of this class than Jim Dandy was the dog.
So here's the thing. This is one of the things that I like to do. Every Monday morning, I come in with some sort of something that I made. And the staff presentations that we have and I did where you had to, you guys, where you had to draw out pictures that represent yourselves, you know.
I see.
Well, and we're to introduce ourselves to the interns who drew pictures of our children. Well, I drew myself. And they were just looking at it, like, and everybody's like, that's it. That's it. Okay, well, and you did that just for us.
I did it for him,
I knew he would appreciate it. Exactly. All right, you guys ready to get started again? All right. So we're gonna move on in your notebooks. Turn to the place that has kind of a Venn diagram with three overlapping circles. If you will, I'll try to draw this on here as well as Derek was drawing. I don't know if I can do it.
You notice I didn't draw you.
Well, that's true. That's true. All right. So this is oh man. Let's see if I can do this right. Did I do it right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, good job. Okay. So this diagram is from a book by Patrick Lencioni called The Ideal Team Player. The Ideal Team Player. And what we're going to learn is that in addition to being a great leader, like Derek said, that leads from the front, and to be a great follower that is following a great leader, we also need to be ideal team players, meaning that this idea that we're leading from 360 degrees, that we need to be great leaders on our team, is being great team players. And in this book, he talks about 3 characteristics that are really, really important for ideal team players, which are all of us as good leaders. Because what we want to be able to do is to add value to our teams and contribute in a way not that makes us look good, but that is helpful and valuable to the team. And so there are 3 key characteristics of ideal team players that we're going to talk about. And I think on the next page, I've got kind of lots and lots of notes, so you guys don't have to take tons of notes. But I'd like for you to stay on the circle page because we're going to talk about each of those characteristics as we move on for the next couple of minutes or so. So the 3 characteristics are that ideal team players are humble, they are hungry, and they are smart. And he defines those terms a little bit differently than you would normally define the terms, okay? So let's talk about what these 3 characteristics mean first before we explore the rest of it. So if we look at the idea of being a humble team player, this is really talking about not so much about humility in terms of meekness. It does mean that, but a real humble team player is not someone that overestimates their value or their abilities on the team, but accurately sees themselves and their contributions to the team, okay? Doesn't underestimate or undervalue themselves as a part of the team, but accurately sees themselves on the team as a part of the team, okay? So when we're talking about the idea of humble, that's how you see yourself and interact as a part of the team. When we think about the characteristic of being hungry, these are the kinds of people that take initiative. These are the kinds of people that are willing to step into the unknown, willing to take risks, willing to stretch themselves and do new things that they've never done before. Recognize your contribution to the team and you're willing to step into that. And then hungry is when you're the one that takes initiative. You move things forward, okay? Smart is not talking about intelligence. It's not talking about IQ. Smart is talking about people smarts, okay? It's talking about knowing and recognizing yourself, knowing and recognizing the characteristics of other people and the value that they bring to the team. It's knowing how to communicate with people in a way that resonates with them, okay? It's about self-awareness, being smart about yourself, but particularly in terms of knowing how to use that, allowing that to inform how you lead and interact with other people, okay? So an ideal team player needs to have all of these things and be somewhere right here in the middle, okay? Now, we recognize that from time to time, we're all not right there in the middle, right? That there are different things, different circumstances that have come up, and it's caused us to move out of the middle and to maybe we have some different things that are going on in our lives and we're just not as hungry and we're not taking initiative and we're not moving things forward, okay? So maybe we still are humble and still are smart, but we're not hungry. Well, that would put us in this little section right here, okay? Or maybe it's that, hey, you know what? I'm just not really self-aware and I'm just not paying attention to the needs of other people around me. And so I'm not being smart right now, but I'm being humble and I'm being hungry. And maybe that puts me right here in this category. And so what we're going to do is kind of name these different categories and explore what it means to be leaders that are in these different categories. Ideal team players, they know their value, they recognize their value, they take initiative when something needs to be moved forward, they're willing to take risks and change, they're willing to stretch and grow, and they know themselves and how they are called to interact with other people and how they're called to build up other people. That's an ideal team player. But a lot of times we don't fall into that ideal team player. So here are the things that that Patrick Lencioni says if you are in these other areas, okay? So the first one is that sometimes you are just humble, okay? Sometimes you're just humble, and this is where you find yourself, okay? If this is where you find yourself, that is a place where you are kind of serving the role as being a pawn, okay? that is the time that you feel like a victim. Well, I can't do anything about it. I just, I don't have anything to contribute. I don't have any value to add. That's just all I can do. And you're humble in terms of, hey, you're not overestimating your ability, but you're not taking initiative and you're not thinking about how other people can be led and interacted with, and you just find yourself in this place of playing the victim. Okay? So that's what happens when you are just humble. Now, when you are just hungry, you are the bulldozer. You guys recognize that? The bulldozer, okay? The bulldozer is a person who's really hungry, who's really ready to move stuff forward. They're not paying attention to the other people, and they don't have an accurate view of themselves on the team. They don't even think about the team. They're just ready to move things forward. And what happens a lot of times, bulldozers, when people are really, really hungry, at first it looks like, oh man, you're doing great stuff. Go for it, go for it. And then all of a sudden they look around and they realize they're not leading anybody, because they have created this trail of destruction behind them because they're not paying attention to people and they're not recognizing the value of team. And so at first you may think, man, that guy is a go-getter, he's taking so much initiative. But eventually you figure out you're leaving people in the dust. And you're leaving a wake of destruction behind you if you are the charmer. The charmer, okay? The charmer is a person that knows what to say, they know when to say it, and they say it when the people that matter are around. Okay? You guys know these people, they're big connectors, they're people's people. They want to say the right thing when it's the right time, not necessarily for the betterment of the team, not necessarily so they can move the mission forward, but so they can please people and so they can be seen as the one who has all the connections. That is when you are smart, but not hungry and not humble. Now, oftentimes there are times in our life that maybe we're not in one of these extremes, but we have in that area. When you are humble and you are hungry, but you are not smart, you're the accidental mess maker. So the accidental mess maker, I love that term because whenever I heard it, I was like, I know these people. I have been these people from time to time. It's a season in your life when you're not paying attention to yourself and self-awareness and the awareness of how you're called to interact and lead other people. You're not paying attention to that and you're not being smart about it. And what ends up happening is you make accidental messes. You do things that you didn't intend to do. You say things that you didn't intend to say. You hurt people that you didn't intend to hurt. And then you have to apologize for it afterwards. I am so sorry. I didn't even think about that. I am so sorry. I didn't think about how that would affect you. Or you can identify accidental mess makers by the people that have to explain to other people. Well, if you knew her, you would understand. You know, if you understood where he was coming from, then you would be able to put that into perspective. So if people have to explain you or apologize for you, or you find yourself having to explain yourself and apologize a lot, then it might be that you're an accidental mess maker. And what you need is more training in how to interact with people, how to understand their point of view. Some of the kinds of things that we've been doing in here, like the perspective taking, that is crucial for being smart, for being people smart. So that is an accidental mess maker. Now, if you are humble and smart, but not hungry, okay, down here, I'm just going to put LS. That is the lovable slacker. Lovable slacker. All right. So the lovable slacker is so lovable. They're the people on your team that they value the contribution of the team. They understand their importance to the team. They're people smart. They relate well to other people. But you know what? As long as everybody is happy and the team is getting along, it's okay. We don't have to go anywhere. I don't feel the need to exert any effort moving forward. It's okay. These people, it's really hard to get angry with these people because you love them, but they're not hungry. They don't engage the thoughts that they have with the mission and move it forward, okay? So from time to time, you may find yourself in that lovable slacker mentality, which means that what you need is an infusion of vision in order to say, hey, what is God calling me to? And what is my time frame in this? There is a time limit to what we've been called to do. There needs to be an urgency to our mission. Let's move it forward. So sometimes you might find yourself as a lovable slacker. If you are hungry and smart, I'm going to put an SP, and that is a skillful politician. And what he talks about in the book is that this one is the most dangerous to your team. And here's why. Because a skillful politician is an actor. They can play a role. They're smart enough to know what is beneficial for the team and how people interact and how to persuade and influence people, but they don't see the value of the team. They really do think they are the genius in the room. They really do think they are the smartest person. They really do think that nobody on the team has the answer that they have. Now, they're not going to say it like that because they're smart, but they don't value the team and think about what is best for the team. So one of the things that Derek talked about things that we've been learning at the chapel is this whole thought about valuing the value of the enterprise over my personal interests. Whatever is best for the organization comes before what is best for my personal interest. And if you're looking at the skillful politician, they don't buy into that. They're like, no, what's best for me is what's best. And so when you look at all of these different things, I would encourage you guys to think about, where do you find yourself? Where do you find yourself now? Where do you find yourself from time to time? And as leaders who are leading other people, where do you find the people that you work with? Because here's the beautiful thing, unless you are way off the chart in one of these areas, it's great and it's good for you to come back to the center. There are things that you can do to develop these skills within you in order to shift your thinking and help you move forward toward the center. So it's not that, hey, I'm a charmer and I'm always going to be a charmer and that's the way it is. There are opportunities for you guys to recognize where you are in terms of being an ideal team player and how God is calling you to move toward the center. So there are a couple of questions in your notebook. And what I'd like for you guys to do is talk about this with the people at your table. Where would you place yourself on this chart? Where would you place those that you need? And how can you use this to help them develop into ideal team players? How can you use this knowledge and this model to help you lead others well and become the disciples and the leaders that God is calling them to be? So you guys talk about those three questions at your table.
Hey,
Jay?
did you talk about us doing this?
No, go ahead.
Let me say just a word about it. This is pretty deep. So a while back, here at the chapel, it was just off. It was just things weren't moving smoothly. And so we looked at a lot of technical solutions. We looked at a lot of specifics that we were trying to and nothing was working. It just didn't feel right. So this was kind of when we came along this stuff. And so what I did was I went through and I took everybody on staff and I put them where I thought they were. And then I had them put them where they thought they were. And then I met with them. It was real interesting. We never were off. I usually would have them a little bit closer than they had them, but we were always in the same quadrant. And then we figured out what could we do to help them move a little bit closer. And here's what we discovered in that. There were two key relationships, a part of our, just sort of core part of our staff that were not here. And some of them were not here. One of them was here, not here because of just family situations in their life. They had other demands that had pulled them out. And one of them, we had made some structural changes in our system that put them out of that we had to readjust. And simply by identifying that's what's going on, we got key players that are not in that sweet spot right now, and it's messing up the whole dynamic. It's like our wheels are out of alignment. And when we got that fixed, everything sort of started flowing again. So a lot of times when things are off base, it's really a relational deal about the ideal team player more than it is any particular thing. And it's fixable. All the people that were there on staff are still on staff. It was all work. We just had to kind of rearrange some things. Does that make sense? Okay. So this is what your exercise is really important.
How does this tie into like the Briggs-Myers, Myers-Briggs psychological test, where you have the personalities? Derek talked about, introverts versus extroverts. I know that's a big thing on the Myers-Briggs, but it also has 4 quadrants on his.
Yeah, but you can be any one of those things in any one of these places.
Yeah.
So you could be ENTP or extrovert and be here or here or here. So it would overlay it. It wouldn't replace it.
And I do think that there are some personality types that are more prone toward being hungry and driven and that kind of thing. So, but you have to recognize, hey, just because that's my bent to be way up here doesn't mean that that's what's best for the team. And so you definitely can find yourself with a bent towards one or the other, with a bent towards relationship or result. You figure out where you are in terms of your personality and just your makeup, but there's always going to be a way for you to move back toward the middle. But I do agree that your personality tends to put you more in one of these categories than another. Yeah.
So like for me, I'm never going to be bullseye right here. The best I can do is right here. It's just because it's part of the way I'm wired.
Because results.
Because of results.
But you have to work at it to be that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But I don't have to be way out here.
Right.
So isn't it like character building? That's the missing component from the corporate, as in secular corporate situation. That's what's missing there is the character building. So it's missing this overlay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And we're not talking about smart, like the getting educated and training and interpersonal.
Interestingly, though, in the business world, they're gravitating more and more toward this type of like valuing emotional intelligence, not just the intellectual.
And this is a business book. So this is not a church book. This is a business book. Yeah, he is a business consultant.
Yeah, Dan Goleman's book on emotional intelligence is the classic one. He's not the original researcher, but he's the one who wrote a easily readable book
And
on it.
Peter Scazzaro wrote one that is emotional intelligence from a spiritual perspective too. So he kind of ties those things in. Emotionally healthy spirituality is Peter Scazzaro.
But all of those personality tests show where you are at the time. You take the same personality test over time, you'll move. But also, we make decisions about our life. We are not trapped into a certain personality. We make decisions about our life. And if you're a charmer, you can decide, this is my tendency, 'but I need to move here.
So you guys talk about that, those 3 questions at your table.
There you go.
Where are you at?
Or not. Whatever else we're talking about. You have to make the voters, so I just Yeah. They probably do it all.
You put them Oh, yeah. How much that was task smart that, like, It's always that one, Like they said, I think by doing this with me, like they sat down and they did it as work. That was all. You know, it's harder to see actually like wherever they all come. The difference harder than, you know, like I would say I did that. Probably just either that or like I do this a lot. I do that one. Like they go in, I'm more hungry. Alright, you, it's probably the thing for the day. That worked out. I like that. I really do. Yeah, it needs to be done. Yes. So where are you?
Areas where I need to make shifts.
All right, let's go ahead and move on.
Where are you from?
All right, so here's what I'd like for you guys to do. In your notebook, go to the next section that is actually number 9 there. A leader thinks differently. Now, here's the thing. This should not be new stuff to you guys. Do you guys remember back months ago at this point when we went through the basic lay sermon class, we talked about leadership and what that looks like? You guys had this same list months ago. Now, here's what I would like for you guys to do, okay? Because a lot of what you guys listed on that first chart or the second chart with Derek were when he said, hey, what is leadership? A lot of the things that you guys said leadership were the things that are on this chart, okay? And here's what I would like for you guys to do. For just a moment, we're going to take a little time, okay? And I would like for you guys to look at the list, and this will be an individual activity, kind of a reflection activity. And I would like for you guys to think about what are the things that are true in your life? Do you do the things that are on the prioritized list, or right now are you kind of on the not list, where maybe at this point in your life you're like, you know what, I really think that I'm getting too competitive. That I'm not thinking about cooperation with other people in the church. Maybe I'm not thinking about cooperation with the different churches that are in my community. Maybe I have this spirit of competition where it's my ministry against another ministry, or it's my church against another church. So take a moment and just kind of evaluate with each of these things, where do you find yourself? Maybe you find yourself somewhere in the middle. Put a star somewhere in the middle where you're like, hey, I mean, because this can be a range. Maybe it's not all one side or all the other side, but you say, I don't know, I'm not totally on one side or the other, but I'm close to it. And then what I'd like for you guys to do is after you move through that and take a little bit of time to think about that, flip back in your notebook and find the one that you did last time and see how that has changed. See how that's different. It might be that now that you've learned more about leadership and you've explored it more and you've been thinking about it more, you're more aware of some of your weaknesses and some of your areas that you need to improve. That is not a bad thing at all. That shows growth. So it's not all move back and forth between the column as to characteristics and principles of myself as a leader. So take a little bit of time and do that, and then go back and kind of compare. I don't know which, Rebecca, what did you find? It's on page 9 under
Module 1.
Module 1, page 9 is where you did it the last time, okay? Once you guys have done that, you can go ahead and have some table conversation, talking about where is your potential for improvement, what area might be holding you back from greater influence. Okay, so talk about those two questions with the people at your table.
We didn't circle, we wrote notes.
Well, some stuff started, some stuff
Right. So I remember you going, so I remember you reading them.
And maybe I didn't have you guys, I didn't follow my own directions. That is not, that's not an exceptional thing. I often don't follow my own directions. Well, it doesn't say. We did. Oh, there's probably says to it. My notes to myself. Guaranteed it says that. I was just like.
I do my own
You
thing.
guys got it.
My nose in a hurt. Probably like, well, you can also argue in that it was the Holy Spirit that brought it over them. Maybe that's the way we do it. Jesus is always the
Like, you know, like, good news, on towards the point on the.
You can totally have groups, yeah, you can totally have groups, that migrate, yes. Generally, there are gonna be, there are some exceptions, but generally, you're gonna have people that are further, like if you have a group that's hungry, they're just off the rails doing this stuff and they're not gonna be accountable and they're just gonna whatever. you generally have some people who maybe are more people smart in that, or maybe more, team attentive in that. But because that leader is so hungry that's kind of decreasing their ability to express that. So a lot of times.
Go way out there. We go involve like away.
Yes.
Okay, but like you.
Yeah, and so when you think about, where your team is as a whole, then you can think about, okay, well, as a whole, what does my team need? So to be able to place the team and to be able to place individuals, when you're working with individuals and you know that this person needs one thing and this person needs another thing, that's great. But to say, okay, what kind of training and support do I need in my team? That's when you can identify that team and help them move as a whole toward a different thing. But you're right, when you develop that in yourself, it begins to, because that's what you do. You end up sharing the things that you're learning.
I mean, there was no other way to explain it.
I was like, but I wanted to.
Everybody else.
Right, yeah.
So your job later. At this moment, I am feeling, and I don't know if it's because of me feeling more to me, like I know I have to. I know I have so much to do. Because I am a very independent, like, inspiration. That's why I'm trying by myself.
I have watched put them to shame.
I don't even know what you meant by like this. Okay, so come here, we're looking at our notes. We're like, what does this mean?
jobs are tools to get people there. Exactly. So when you think about a role or a position, we at the chapel talk about how jobs are tools to get people done. Meaning that your job is what develops you into the person God has called you to be. It's not that, oh, I have all the tools for this job. No, your job is what helps you develop those tools. So instead of seeing jobs as, or people as tools to get jobs done, you see jobs as tools to get people done.
Oh, okay.
That's the shift. Yeah. I'm glad I knew that, because sometimes I say names and I'm like, who said that? I don't even know
What was that? You know, 5 leaders.
emotional and spiritual. Now, I recommend that book. There is the Emotionally Healthy Woman, which is a great book, but it's more of a shallow book that goes nicely to Sarah. So you can spell that however you think is appropriate. Yeah. But if you type in emotionally healthy spirituality, it'll come up. Yeah. But get the one that's in for the Exactly. All right. So our lunch is here early. And I'd like for us to go ahead and eat it while it's hot. The last little point that I wanted to give you guys today, point number 10 is this. A leader is purposeful and intentional with his or her time and talents. It is so important that you guys, that all of us, take the time to know how we were created and what we were created to do and who we were created to lead, so then we know what to do. Let's not be people that confuse busyness with effectiveness. Just because I am busy does not mean that I am using some talents that God, the mission and the way that He intended me to use it. So a lot of people in ministry are really busy, and people are like, oh man, you're doing such a great job. You can be doing lots of stuff, and you can be doing terrible stuff. And people will still, man, you're so busy. Good job, good job. And all of a sudden, we confuse busyness with effectiveness. And leaders make sure that not just that you're doing things, but you're doing the right thing in the right way at the right time. So effectiveness in leadership might be scaling back some things that you were not created to do and empowering some other people to do those things that you were doing that you're not created to do. So be really intentional with your time. Know who you are and what you are called to do, who you are called to do it with, and do that thing. Don't confuse busyness with effectiveness. Okay? All right, well, let's go ahead. I think we've got Shane for lunch. So does anybody want to pray for our lunch and bless it? Gary. Perfect.
Father, we thank you for who you are in our lives. We are so grateful to be able to gather in your name. We're so grateful to receive knowledge, Lord, that points to you, how we can be more effective for your kingdom, to make disciples, to lift people up in your name. It's all about you. Lord, we thank you for the food we're about to receive. We use it in your kingdom, to your good. In Jesus' name. Amen.
So I got 3 stacks here. This is pork in this one. This is chicken in this one. And this is special order. So we have a salad and then a gluten-free. So whoever of those are for, yours are down here at the end.
JJ and Lori.
Chicken, gluten-free, salad.